Warning, this is not just a book, it's a weapon. What if someone could control your thoughts, emotions, and decisions without you even realizing it? Dark Psychology 111 exposes the terrifying tactics used to manipulate your mind in everyday life. Watch closely, because the enemy might already be inside your head. Chapter 1. The Anatomy of Darkness. What is dark psychology? In the quiet chambers of the human mind, where thoughts murmur and emotions ripple beneath the surface, there exists a shadow few dare to explore. Not the darkness of ignorance or despair, but the intelligent, deliberate darkness of manipulation, deception, and control. This is the realm of dark psychology, an evolving field that explores the weaponization of psychological principles to dominate, coerce, influence, and reshape the will of others. It is not science used for healing or understanding, but for conquest and control. Where light psychology nurtures the soul, dark psychology cages it. To understand the anatomy of darkness, we must first acknowledge a bitter truth. Manipulation is not the exception in human behavior. It is often the rule. Beneath the civility of conversations, the warmth of smiles, and the structure of societies lie unspoken battles of dominant, subtle wars for influence and control. Some manipulate for survival, others for power, some even for pleasure. And dark psychology is the systematic study of these silent conflicts, tracing the threads of influence that stretch from everyday conversation to full-blown psychological warfare. The core of dark psychology is not merely a series of tactics. It is a philosophy built upon understanding and exploiting the vulnerabilities of the human psyche. It asks questions that traditional psychology avoids. How can one bend the truth without detection? How does one implant ideas that feel self-generated? How can one erode identity or loyalty without ever lifting a hand? It's a framework where ethical lines blur and morality is viewed not as a boundary, but as a tool, one that can be bent, broken, or ignored at its heart. Dark psychology is the art of using empathy as a weapon, logic as a trap, and trust as the key to the mind's vault. Its power lies not in brute force, but in psychological finesse, the ability to make someone feel seen, understood, even loved, all while steering them toward your hidden agenda. This isn't the psychology of the broken. It is the psychology of the predator, cloaked as protector, the manipulator who makes you feel in control as they guide your every move. It operates in silence, thrives in ambiguity, and hides in the everyday. From influence to control, the spectrum of darkness. Imagine the mind as a house. On the surface, it has a front porch, conversations, social norms, smiles, and customs. This is where light psychology works, encouraging healthier behaviors, communication, and coping. But as we move inside the house, into the living rooms of belief, the hallways of emotion, and the basements of trauma, we find where dark psychology dwells. Emotional manipulation is the first threshold. It is not always overt abuse, but subtle, guilt-tripping, passive aggression, or conditional affection. It's the parent who says, "If you loved me, you wouldn't do this." Or the partner who cries, not from pain but from strategy. The manipulator learns your emotional triggers, then plays them like a piano. Covert persuasion is next. It is persuasion, hidden in kindness, suggestion buried in praise. Here, the manipulator doesn't argue but implies. They let you believe the idea was yours. They don't command, they inspire. It's the art of putting thoughts in someone's mind without them ever knowing the source. Then comes mind control, often confused with the dramatic sci-fi versions. In dark psychology, mind control is quieter, a consistent reshaping of beliefs and identities over time. It is repetition, isolation, framing, and identity manipulation. It's cults that don't look like cults. It's organizations, relationships, and ideologies that infiltrate your thought process until their voice becomes your own. Deception and mind Games form the architecture of control. Lies are not always spoken, they are often structural, embedded in the environment, the expectations, or even silence. Gaslighting is a classic example, the calculated effort to make someone question their own reality. The manipulator changes the map, then accuses you of being lost. Hypnosis and neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, serve as the surgical instruments of dark psychology. While traditional hypnosis is therapeutic, in the hands of manipulators, it becomes a tool for planting ideas while defenses are low. NLP techniques, such as mirroring or anchoring, allow manipulators to build instant rapport and subtly direct choices, bypassing critical filters. Finally, brainwashing, a word heavy with history and implication. Brainwashing is not just ideological coercion or torture. In the modern world, it's far more elegant. It's social media algorithms reinforcing beliefs until alternatives feel repulsive. It's the echo chamber effect. It's sustained emotional and cognitive manipulation until identity itself is restructured. When used intentionally and methodically, it is the dark magician's masterpiece. The mask of sanity. Most dark psychologists aren't clinically insane. They're not foaming at the mouth or shouting at shadows. In fact, they often appear more sane, more composed, more charming than the average person. Why? Because manipulation requires composure. Deception requires control. Darkness requires a mask. Psychopathy and narcissism are frequently associated with dark psychology, and for good reason. Psychopaths often lack empathy and remorse, making it easy for them to manipulate without guilt. Narcissists, driven by the need for admiration and control, may unconsciously deploy many dark tactics as a form of emotional survival. But one need not have a disorder to use dark psychology. Many techniques can be and are used by ordinary individuals, often without realizing the depth of their actions. It's important to realize that dark psychology is not pathology. It's strategy. It is cold-blooded awareness of human vulnerability, paired with the ability to exploit it. Whether this knowledge is used for evil or good depends on the wielder, but the blade is sharp. Either way, darkness in the everyday. We imagine dark psychology as something reserved for cult leaders, interrogators, or shadowy figures in smoky rooms. But the truth is, it lives in everyday life. A friend who weaponizes secrets. A boss who praises to extract obedience. A partner who slowly isolates you from your support network, not by force, but by concern. It doesn't always scream. It often whispers. Dark psychology plays out in advertising, politics, corporate training, and even religious communities. In each domain, someone is seeking to mold beliefs, influence behavior, and redirect loyalty, not always maliciously, but often without transparency. Imagine a chess game, but the board is your mind, and your opponent plays without telling you the rules. That is the experience of being manipulated through dark psychology. You don't even know you're playing until you've already lost a few pieces. The ethics of awareness to learn about dark psychology is to walk a razor's edge. Knowledge is power, but power corrupts or, at least tempts. This book does not glorify manipulation, nor does it moralize it. It reveals it. To defend against darkness, one must first see in the dark, and to see in the dark, one must train the eyes. Understanding dark psychology is not about becoming a predator. It's about not being prey. It's about recognizing when words are knives, when praise is poison, and when empathy is armor disguised as a leash. It's about seeing the puppeteer behind the curtain of charisma. This knowledge also presents an ethical dilemma. Once you understand these tactics, what will you do with them? Will you use them to shield others or to steer them? Will you become the light in the dark or the darkness within the light? The choice, as always, is yours. But the truth remains, you cannot unsee what has been seen. Welcome to the abyss. Dark psychology is not a myth or a fantasy. It is a reality we swim in every day. It is the hidden current beneath our choices, the silent architect of conflict. and the unseen hand in persuasion. Whether we acknowledge it or not, it shapes our relationships, our ideologies, and our self-concept. To study it is to study power, not just power over others, but power over perception, identity, and belief. It is not for the faint-hearted, but for those who dare to look into the abyss and map its edges. It offers protection, liberation, and, perhaps, a glimpse of something more powerful than darkness itself, clarity. As we step further into this book, each chapter will peel back more layers of this shadowed world. We will study the mechanics of mind control, the artistry of deception, the rituals of brainwashing, and the strategies of psychological warfare. But for now, know this: you have opened a door, and on the other side lies a world where words wound, smiles deceive, and influence is not earned, it is taken. Welcome to Dark Psychology 111. The descent has just begun. Chapter 2. The Manipulator's Mind, Understanding the Predator Within. In the jungle of human interaction, not all predators wear fangs or claws. Some wear tailored suits, carry charming smiles, and speak in carefully crafted phrases designed to disarm rather than alarm. They don't stalk their prey in the wild, but within boardrooms, bedrooms, and friend groups. These are emotional predators, masters of manipulation, who blend into the landscape of everyday life. To understand them is not just to see their actions, but to step inside their minds, decode their intentions, and recognize their architecture of control. This chapter is a descent into the mind of the manipulator, not to justify their methods, but to unmask their logic. Just as a hunter studies the terrain, we must now study the psychological terrain of those who thrive in darkness. Predation reimagined, the mind as a weapon like lions in the savannah. The human predator does not hunt with force. They hunt with psychology. Their weapons are not claws but coos facial expressions, tone shifts, emotional leverage, and timed silences. Their goals are not sustenance, but control, submission, and psychological territory. At the core of every manipulator's psyche lies a set of driving needs. Control, not merely over circumstances, but over people's thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Superiority, a need to feel dominant, smarter, or more evolved than those around them. Validation through conquest, gaining affirmation not by being loved, but by being obeyed or feared. Low empathy, with high cognitive empathy, they may not feel your pain, but they understand it and know exactly how to use it. This last trait is crucial. Manipulators are not emotionally ignorant. In fact, their cognitive empathy, the ability to understand what others feel without feeling it themselves, is often highly developed. Like a surgeon who feels nothing for the body he dissects, they slice through emotions with a chilling precision. The Predator's Playbook, Core Psychological Principles 2. Understand the manipulator is to understand their toolkit, an arsenal of psychological tactics designed to bypass resistance and install obedience. Mirroring, the predator mimics your emotions, preferences, and worldview to establish rapport. You feel understood. You trust them. This is not connection, it is calculation. Gaslighting. Once trust is built, reality becomes malleable. Through lies, contradictions, and feigned concern, the manipulator erodes your confidence in your perception, leading you to depend on their version of reality. Intermittent reinforcement. This is the reward system of slot machines and toxic relationships. Love, praise, and attention are given unpredictably, making the target addicted to seeking approval. The manipulator becomes both the source of pain and the hope of pleasure. Triangulation. They pit people against each other to maintain power. By involving a third party, real or imagined, they provoke jealousy, competition, or paranoia. Control is maintained through division, projection, and blame shifting. When confronted, they flip the narrative. You become the aggressor, the selfish one, the unstable partner. Their manipulation hides behind your defensiveness. Each of these tactics, is not just used, it's internalized. The manipulator doesn't consult a playbook. These patterns are ingrained habits, developed over time and reinforced by past success. Origins of a manipulator: nature, nurture, and narcissism. Where does the manipulative mind originate? While there's no singular path, it's often a combination of innate temperament, traumatic experiences, and environmental conditioning. Childhood neglect or abuse can teach a child that vulnerability is dangerous and manipulation is safety. If love was earned only through performance or obedience, the child may grow into an adult who sees people not as companions, but as systems to be decoded and controlled. Overindulgence can produce a different kind of predator, one who believes the world exists to serve their needs. Their manipulation is not survival, it's entitlement. Personality disorders, particularly narcissistic, antisocial, sociopathic, or borderline, can increase the likelihood of manipulative tendencies. However, not all manipulators are disordered. Some are simply pragmatic, cold, strategic. It's important to note that manipulation is not always malicious. In some cases, it is an adaptive response strategy that worked. But when manipulation becomes a dominant mode of operation, when it harms others without remorse, it evolves from adaptation to predation. The predator's camouflage, charm, and credibility. One of the greatest myths about manipulators is that they are easy to spot overtly cruel, cold, or hostile. In reality, their power lies in camouflage. Manipulators are often the most charming people in the room. They're attentive, generous, funny, and helpful, until they're not. Why? Because trust is the doorway, and charm is the key. They build credibility, not by intimidation, but by mirroring values, creating emotional intimacy, and delivering just enough honesty to appear authentic. They know how to tell half-truths that feel like full trust. They control how they're perceived with the precision of a stage director, ensuring that any protest from their victims sounds unbelievable to outsiders. To the world, they're heroes. To their victims, they're architects of self-doubt. The internal logic of the manipulator: to resist a manipulator, we must understand not just what they do, but how they think. A manipulator sees relationships as transactions, not connections. They value people based on utility, what can be extracted, gained, or controlled. This does not always mean material gain. Often, it's emotional fuel: admiration, obedience, attention. They rationalize their behavior through internal narratives, like, if I don't control the situation, I'll be vulnerable. People are stupid. If I don't lead them, they'll ruin everything. They asked for it. If they let me do it, it's their fault. I'm not manipulating them, just being persuasive. These justifications allow them to sleep soundly while playing chess with people's minds. Emotional vampirism, feeding on feelings. Manipulators are not just predators, they're emotional vampires. They feed on your energy, confidence, and clarity. Their power grows in proportion to your confusion. The more uncertain you are, the more influence they wield. They deliberately disrupt your emotional equilibrium, making you question yourself. Then they offer clarity that serves their agenda. Over time, your inner compass is replaced with their voice. Your decisions feel like yours, but they were scripted long ago. This is not love. It is consumption, when the predator is within. Sometimes the manipulator is not someone else but ourselves. Every human has the capacity for manipulation. We've all, at times, withheld the truth to gain favor, exaggerated to influence, or used guilt to sway others. The line between influence and manipulation is not always clear, and the manipulative mind often begins with small compromises. Self-reflection is key. Ask yourself, do I often feel the need to control others' decisions for their own good? Do I use emotional displays strategically rather than authentically? Do I avoid direct communication and instead maneuver through implication? If the answer is yes, the predator may have begun to grow within. The key is awareness. Darkness thrives in denial, but dissolves under scrutiny. Decoding the hunter, understanding the manipulator's mind, is like learning a foreign language. At first it feels unnatural, but once fluency is achieved, the patterns become obvious. The predator's moves are no longer mystifying, they're predictable. Their tactics lose power the moment they are seen for what they are, not magic, but manipulation. To know the manipulator is to strip them of their greatest power and visibility. You see the script behind the performance. You hear the motive behind the praise. You feel the trap beneath the kindness. But awareness is only the first step. In later chapters, we'll explore how to resist these tactics, reclaim your mental territory, and even turn the tools of dark psychology toward personal resilience. For now, hold this truth close. The predator relies on your blindness. Your vision is their downfall. You have begun to see. Chapter 3. Emotional Puppeteering. The Secrets of Hidden Manipulation. There is no prison more confining than one whose walls you cannot see. Emotional manipulation, true strategic manipulation, is not the brute force demand of tyrants. It is the invisible hand that moves the strings of your emotions while you dance, unaware, to someone else's tune. It is emotional puppeteering, the silent theater, where your thoughts, reactions, and choices are directed without your consent. In this psychological stage, the manipulator doesn't shout commands. They whisper them in the language of feelings, covert, persuasive, and disarmingly familiar. Welcome to the deepest layer of dark psychology, where influence is not negotiated or requested, is extracted. This chapter is about unveiling the structure of emotional manipulation, examining how skilled manipulators access the hidden levers of the human heart to bend it to their will. The nature of the puppet, strings emotions as leverage. Human beings are not purely rational creatures. We are emotional engines, wrapped in a thin layer of logic. Manipulators know this. They don't waste time appealing to reason when they can exploit fear, guilt, hope, shame, and love. Imagine your emotions as strings that attach to different parts of your behavior, your decisions, reactions, values, and memories. The emotional puppeteer knows how to tug each string in just the right sequence to produce a specific response. You feel angry without knowing why, guilty when you shouldn't, or loyal to someone who's harming you. This is not by accident. It is by design. While a sincere communicator tries to understand your emotions, a manipulator sees them as handle stools to gain access and exert control. Whether it's a friend who always reminds you of how much they've done for you, a partner who cries when you assert a boundary, or a boss who flatters you just before making an unreasonable demand, emotional manipulation is often wrapped in kindness, concern, or affection. That's what makes it so dangerous. It doesn't feel like manipulation. The anatomy of an emotional manipulation sequence. To understand emotional puppeteering, we must examine its structure. Like a magician performing a trick, the manipulator follows a sequence. 1. Target identification. Manipulator first identifies emotional vulnerabilities, abandonment issues, low self-esteem, a need for approval, unresolved guilt, or a hunger for belonging. These are the entry points where the puppeteer can insert their hooks. They may subtly ask questions like, "You seem like someone who puts others first, don't you? Have people hurt you before? I can see it in your eyes. You're not like the others, I can tell." These aren't compliments, they are reconnaissance. 2. Emotional hooking. Once vulnerability is identified, the manipulator creates an emotional bond, often intense, fast-moving, and deep. This is sometimes called love bombing in relationships, or idealization in social or work settings. The goal is to create dependency and attachment. You begin to feel understood, seen, and appreciated in a way that feels rare. This lays the foundation for emotional leverage. 3. String activation. Now the manipulator starts pulling the strings. Using your emotions, they extract behavior. They might use guilt, After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me. Fear. If you leave, I'll fall apart. Do you want that on your conscience? Shame. You're so selfish. No one else would put up with you. Hope. If you just trust me, we can build something amazing. Love. No one will ever love you like I do. These statements are not expressions of feeling. They are emotional transactions. The manipulator wants a return obedience, silence, sacrifice, compliance. 4. Feedback loop and reinforcement. Once the target begins to react predictably, the manipulator reinforces the behavior. If you give in, they reward you with affection or relief. If you resist, they punish you with withdrawal, coldness, or anger. This intermittent reinforcement makes you emotionally addicted to their approval and fearful of their disapproval. It's the same psychological dynamic seen in abusive relationships, cult indoctrination, and even some toxic workplaces. 5. Gaslighting and reality warping. Over time, the puppeteer installs a new reality. You begin to question your own emotions, boundaries, and memories. They may say, "You're overreacting. That never happened. You're just being dramatic." These statements are not corrections. They are surgical strikes against your emotional intelligence. The goal is to make you dependent on their interpretation of events and eventually, of yourself. The theater of control. Everyday examples. You don't have to be in an abusive relationship to experience emotional puppeteering. It happens in subtle forms every day. In relationships, a partner who withholds affection until you apologize even when you're not wrong. In families, a parent who plays the victim to keep you close, saying, "I guess I'll just die alone if you don't come visit." At work, a manager who praises your work only when you work late, making you feel guilty for having boundaries. In friendships, a friend who reminds you of all the times they were there for you, just before asking for a favor. Each example is built on the same principle. Manipulate your emotions to bypass your logic. The puppet master's traits. While anyone can use manipulation occasionally, habitual emotional puppeteers share certain characteristics: high emotional intelligence, low empathy. They understand what you feel, but they don't feel it themselves. Chronic need for control. They feel unsafe unless they are managing others' emotional states. Superficial charm. They use charisma to disarm suspicion and gain trust. Entitlement. They believe they have the right to influence others for their own good or because they deserve loyalty. Denial and deflection. When confronted, they shift blame or accuse you of being too sensitive. The most dangerous puppeteers are those who don't see what they're doing as manipulation. They see it as leadership, love, or protection. This makes them nearly immune to guilt or self-awareness and nearly impossible to stop without exposure. Breaking the strings. How to resist emotional puppeteer. Ingesting manipulation begins with awareness. If you can name it, you can fight it. Step 1. Recognize your triggers. What emotion makes you easiest to control? Guilt, fear of abandonment, the need to be seen as kind. Identify it. Manipulators will target that soft spot every time. Step 2. Listen for patterns, not just words. Don't be distracted by what they say. Watch when and why they say it. Manipulation is revealed not in isolated sentences, but in repeating cycles. Step 3. Practice emotional detachment. If you feel an intense emotional spike during a conversation, pause. Ask yourself, is this reaction mine or was it installed? Creating emotional space gives you cognitive clarity. Step 4. Set boundaries and watch the reaction. A true manipulator will punish your boundaries. They may cry, yell, sulk, or go silent. That response is your confirmation. They were never interested in connection, only in control. Step 5. Document your reality. Write things down. When manipulators try to rewrite your memories or twist the narrative, you'll have a record to compare against their lies. This is a powerful defense against gaslighting. Cutting the strings. Emotional puppeteering is one of the most dangerous forms of psychological manipulation because it targets the very thing that makes us human, our feelings. Unlike overt aggression, this form of control leaves no visible scars, but it cuts deeper than any knife. It steals your sense of self, replaces your instincts with obedience, and makes you doubt your own inner compass. But knowledge is the scissors. Once you see the strings, you can cut them. Once you know the stage, you can leave the theater. Once you recognize the performance, you stop playing the part. The puppeteer's power ends where your awareness begins. You are not a puppet, and you were never meant to dance for someone else's script. Chapter 4. The Art of Persuasion. Covert techniques that bypass conscious thought. In a world overflowing with opinions, advertisements, social agendas, and influence campaigns, the battle for the mind is no longer fought with force, but with persuasion. Not the obvious, in-your-face persuasion of a salesman pitching a vacuum cleaner, but the subtle, almost invisible kind, the covert persuasion that slips beneath your conscious radar and rewires your decision-making without resistance. This is not suggestion. It is seduction of the psyche, and it works because you never realize it's happening. To understand the mechanics of covert persuasion is to understand one of the most powerful and ethically ambivalent tools in the arsenal of dark psychology. In this chapter, we will journey into the undercurrent of influence where persuasion isn't argued, but implanted, and resistance is preemptively disabled before the subject even knows there's a choice to make. Conscious versus subconscious. The split in the mind. The human mind is divided like a two-story house. The conscious mind resides upstairs, where logical reasoning, willpower, and self-awareness dwell. The subconscious mind lives below, quiet, emotional, suggestible, and far more powerful. The conscious mind might say, "I'm in control," but it is the subconscious that drives habits, emotional reactions, and nearly all decision-making. Studies in neuroscience suggest that decisions are often made several seconds before we become consciously aware of them. Covert persuasion targets the subconscious, bypassing the critical gatekeeper of the conscious mind. It doesn't argue, it guides, it doesn't force, it nudges, and over time, these nudges compound into massive shifts in belief, behavior, and perception. The psychology behind covert influence. To truly master covert persuasion, one must understand the mechanisms of mental suggestion. Here are the most common cognitive principles exploited in the art. 1. The principle of priming. Priming occurs when exposure to one stimulus influences your response to a later stimulus without you being aware of the connection. For example, reading. Words related to aging like wrinkle, gray, or retired can unconsciously cause people to walk more slowly afterward. Marketers and manipulators use this to plant specific emotional or behavioral seeds in advance of their true message. Covert persuaders prime you with subtle cues, colors, sounds, gestures, and words that shape your mood, focus, and reception long before the actual persuasive message is delivered. 2. The foot invader technique. This technique works by getting someone to agree to a small request first, which increases the likelihood that they will agree to a larger one later. Why? Because people want to appear consistent with their past behavior. A manipulator might first ask for a minor favor or agreement. "Can you do me a quick favor?" Then escalate slowly over time. Each yes trains the brain to say yes again. The persuasion isn't in the final ask, it's in the pattern. 3. Pacing and leading used in both hypnosis and NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. This technique involves matching the subject's behavior or beliefs pacing, and then guiding them toward a new state or action leading. For instance, a speaker may begin by stating undeniable truths. You're here reading this, you're curious, you value self-mastery, which builds on conscious agreement. Once that rhythm is established, They insert a suggestion so it makes sense that you'll be open to new ways of thinking. Your subconscious mind often fails to differentiate the facts from the conclusion, especially if the transition is smooth. 4. Embedded commands. These are hidden suggestions embedded within larger sentences or statements, structured in a way that slips past conscious resistance. Consider this sentence. People who really succeed in life often find themselves saying, "I'm ready to take the next step." The embedded command, "I'm ready to take the next step," is not overtly directed at you, but your subconscious may adopt it as a self-generated thought. Used skillfully, embedded commands become powerful tools for subtle behavioral control. 5. The double bind. This technique presents the illusion of choice while guiding someone to a predetermined conclusion. Example: would you like to meet at 3 p.m. or 5 p.m.? The hidden suggestion is that you're meeting either way. The only variable is time. Double binds are frequently used in parenting, sales, therapy, and covert persuasion because they reduce resistance by satisfying the illusion of autonomy. 6. Anchoring. Emotions anchoring involves associating a specific emotional state with a particular stimulus, word, gesture, sound, or touch so that it can be reactivated later. A manipulator might touch your shoulder while making you laugh, then repeat that touch during negotiations. Your body unconsciously associates that gesture with trust and openness, making you more susceptible to their request. Anchoring rewires the emotional buttons of the mind. Environmental persuasion. The world as a weapon. Covert persuasion is not just verbal, it's environmental. The persuader curates surroundings that guide behavior without verbal instruction. Lighting can alter mood and perception. Dim lights for vulnerability, bright lights for urgency. Closing parenthesis. Seating arrangements affect power dynamics. Higher chairs, corner placement, head of table, sense, trigger memory, and emotion. Think of how stores use vanilla or cinnamon to create comfort. Music is timed to regulate emotional flow. Upbeat rhythms to energize, slow rhythms to calm or lull. By controlling the setting, the persuader controls the frame in which the message is received, and the frame often determines the interpretation. Real world examples of covert persuasion. These techniques are not rare, they are everywhere in advertising. Brands use colors, pacing, celebrity anchoring, and music to implant associations. In politics, speeches use repetition, priming, fear-based language, and unity metaphors to sway masses and relationships. A partner may use double binds, embedded commands, or emotional anchoring to maintain dominance. In cults and high-control groups, leaders use pacing and leading, repetition, environmental control, and identity priming to erase independent thought. The common theme: the subject often believes they've made a free choice, when in reality, the choice was sculpted for them. The ethics of persuasion, tool or weapon. Persuasion is not inherently evil. Therapists, educators, and leaders use persuasive techniques for healing, empowerment, and growth. The key difference lies in intent and transparency. When persuasion empowers the subject, it is ethical. When it removes autonomy, distorts truth, or benefits only the persuader, it becomes manipulation. But covert persuasion blurs this line by design. It is hidden, and what is hidden cannot be consented to. Thus, the ethical burden lies on the persuader, and the defense rests with the informed, psychological armor. How to protect yourself. Covert persuasion only works when it remains unnoticed. Once you recognize the structure, it loses much of its power. Here's how to build your internal defenses. 1. Slow down your decision-making. Manipulators create urgency to bypass logic. If you feel rushed, pause. Ask yourself, whose agenda am I serving right now? 2. Look for language patterns. Are they stacking agreeable statements to lower your resistance? Embedding commands, offering choices that aren't really choices. Start listening between the lines. 3. Observe environmental triggers. Are you being influenced by music, lighting, or smells? Are your emotions in alignment with logic, or is something off? Tune into your body. It often senses manipulation before the mind does. 4. Ask reflective questions. Pause and ask yourself, did I want this before the conversation? Am I being led to this conclusion? Would I make the same choice alone, without pressure? These questions bring unconscious persuasion into the conscious light. Behind the curtain. Covert persuasion is a form of psychological architecture. It shapes not what you think, but how you think. Its brilliance lies in its invisibility. Its danger lies in its pervasiveness. To see the invisible is to reclaim your autonomy. The next time you feel a sudden urge, an unexplainable attraction, or a decision that feels right but ask, is this mine, or was it installed? Because in the silent war for your mind, awareness is your strongest shield and your clearest mirror. The greatest persuader wins not through force, but through stealth. Now that you've seen the wires behind the illusion, the spell is broken. Let the world try to influence you. You will watch, not dance, and that makes all the difference. Chapter 5. Mind Control. 111. How thoughts are not always your own. There is a chilling realization that comes to those who study the depths of human psychology. Not every thought you think is yours. Some have been whispered into your subconscious by those who understand how to bypass your defenses. Others have crept in through repetition, suggestion, emotional manipulation, or even the simple act of observation. The illusion of free thought is powerful, but in many cases, it is just that, an illusion. Welcome to the shadowy domain of mind control. This chapter unveils the unnerving science and strategy behind controlling human cognition, not through wires or chemicals, but through words, symbols, environments, and emotion. It is not science fiction. It is psychological fact, and its implications are as staggering as they are real. The myth of mental sovereignty. We like to believe our minds are castles, fortified by reason, guarded by willpower. But in truth, they are more like sponges, porous, pliable, and constantly absorbing information from the environment. Most of what we think is filtered, framed, and fed to us long before we become aware of it. The modern world is a playground for psychological architects, those who understand that perception can be manufactured, thoughts can be installed, and identities can be reshaped. The average person makes thousands of decisions each day, yet only a small fraction are truly autonomous. The rest are guided by unseen hands, marketers, influencers, ideologues, institutions, and individuals who master the art of subconscious persuasion. The building blocks of mind control. Let us dissect how thoughts are planted, shaped, and sustained without your awareness. 1. Repetition is revelation. The brain interprets repetition as truth. It's a survival mechanism. If something is said often enough, it must be important. This is known as the illusory truth effect. Politicians, cult leaders, and propagandists rely on this like a script. Repeat the same message over and over, and it eventually lodges in the subconscious as fact. You may not believe something the first time you hear it, but by the 10th repetition, your brain no longer resists. It adapts. 2. Framing and linguistic architecture. The way a message is framed, that is, the context in which it's presented, has an enormous impact on how it's received. Consider the difference between 95% success rate versus 5% failure rate. Freedom fighters versus terrorists. Both may describe the same event or group, but the framing changes your emotional response and perception. Skilled manipulators use framing to shape meaning, guiding your conclusions without changing the facts. 3. Information overload and mental fatigue. When people are overwhelmed with information, they begin to rely on mental shortcuts. These cognitive shortcuts, called heuristics, allow the brain to function efficiently, but also make it more vulnerable to manipulation. In a fatigued state, you're more likely to accept suggestions, defer to authority, or follow the crowd. Mind control does not always require deep hypnosis. Sometimes, it just requires exhausting your conscious mind. 4. Emotional hijacking. Emotion is the doorway to influence. When you're emotionally triggered, whether by fear, desire, anger, or sadness, your rational mind takes a back seat. This is called amygdala hijacking. Manipulators intentionally provoke emotional reactions, then insert suggestions while your defenses are down. In this moment, you're highly suggestible, even if you don't realize it. Once the emotional charge fades, the implanted idea remains disguised as your own. 5. Social proof and herd mentality. People naturally model their behavior on what they see others doing. This tendency, called social proof, is amplified in uncertain or unfamiliar situations. If everyone is laughing, you laugh. If everyone believes a lie, you question your doubt. Social media weaponizes this. Likes, shares, and comments create a false sense of consensus that pressures you to conform. Once conformed, the thought feels like your own. 6. Echo chambers and thought bubbles. The digital world thrives on algorithms that feed you more of what you already believe. Over time, your feed becomes an echo chamber, a curated environment where opposing views are minimized and your current beliefs are constantly reinforced. This leads to belief entrenchment, the illusion that your thoughts are independently formed, when, in fact, they are being systematically shaped. In echo chambers, you are not thinking, you are being thought through. Real-world mechanisms of mind control. Mind control isn't always overt. It often wears the costume of culture, education, or even care. In media, news networks selectively present information, use fear-based headlines, and repeat narratives until they become mental default settings. In advertising, brands associate their products with emotional triggers, freedom, love, success through repetition and framing. In relationships, abusive partners isolate victims, distort reality, and install beliefs through sustained emotional manipulation. In cults or high-control groups, leaders reframe identity, instill us versus them thinking, and use ritual repetition to implant new belief systems. In each case, the target believes their thoughts are their own, till they try to leave. Only then does the fog begin to lift. The inner mechanics, installing and reinforcing thoughts. Let's go deeper. How are beliefs not just influenced, but installed? Step 1. Identity breakdown. To control thought, the manipulator first dismantles existing identity. This can be done through isolation, criticism, or emotional destabilization. You may hear, "You've been lied to your whole life. Your family doesn't really know you. The old you wasn't the real you." Once doubt sets in, the subject seeks a new identity, one that the manipulator conveniently provides. Step 2. Thought infiltration. Now, suggestions are inserted subtly, but persistently. They might take the form of affirmations, repeated daily reframed narratives, hypnotic language patterns, authoritative decrees. Thought is designed to feel self-generated even when it's externally imposed. Step 3. Internalization and feedback. The new thought is rewarded either with praise, belonging, or relief from uncertainty. As the target begins to echo the belief, it cements itself neurologically. Now, the subject defends the thought as their own. This is not influence. This is mental colonization. The illusion of free will. You might ask, if thoughts can be manipulated, do I have free will at all? Here's the brutal truth. Free will is a muscle. If you don't exercise it, someone else will move your limbs. Free will exists, but it's often on autopilot. We move through life on mental scripts installed by parents, culture, media, and experience. Mind control exploits those scripts, sometimes rewriting them entirely. It is not about turning you into a robot. It's about making sure the choices you believe are free are quietly predetermined. How to detect thought intrusion. Notice sudden shifts. If your opinions change drastically and quickly, especially Under emotional pressure, ask yourself, did I choose this? Or did it just arrive? Challenge absolute beliefs. Any belief that feels immune to questioning is a potential implant. True beliefs can withstand scrutiny. Disrupt repetition. Change your information diet. Read opposing viewpoints. Take breaks from media. Break the cycle. Break the spell. Reclaim mental space. Silence is your weapon. In stillness, you can hear the difference between your voice and theirs. Ask, who benefits? If a belief serves someone else more than you, question its origin. Was it planted? Awakening the watcher within. Mind control is not fantasy. It is the science of suggestion, the art of infiltration, and the strategy of power. Your mind is both a fortress and a sponge, strong when aware, weak when unaware. But awareness changes everything. Once you realize that thoughts can be planted, you begin to question the soil they grow from. Once you see the manipulation, it loses its magic. Once you hear the puppet master's whisper, you cut the strings. In the end, mind control is not about dominating you. It's about making you dominate yourself with thoughts that aren't yours. But now you know, now you watch, now you think, and now the mind is yours again. Chapter 6. Mind Games, Exposed. Strategic Deception in Action. Some battles are fought with weapons. Others are fought with words. But the most insidious wars are waged in silence through calculated confusion, subtle manipulation, and strategic deception. These are the battlegrounds of the mind game, where the goal isn't to defeat your opponent, but to control them without their knowing. A true manipulator doesn't force submission. They make their target choose it willingly. This chapter pulls back the curtain on mind games, the psychological chess match, where every gesture, silence, and smile may conceal an ulterior motive. In this terrain, deception is not an accident. It's a strategy. Understanding these games is not about becoming paranoid, but about becoming perceptive, knowing the rules so you can stop being a pawn and start playing on your own terms. What are mind games? Mind games are not jokes or harmless psychological tricks. They are intentional strategies of psychological control. They operate on several levels. Emotional confusion, creating dissonance, so the target can't trust their feelings. Power imbalance, making the other person feel one step behind or off balance. Behavioral conditioning, rewarding obedience, punishing resistance. Self-doubt and second-guessing, eroding confidence until the manipulator becomes the compass. At their core, mind games aim to distort perception, create dependency, and install the manipulator's frame of reality, like a stage magician. The manipulator wants your attention on one hand, while the other is rearranging your life. The 5 laws of the mind game. There is a dark logic behind every successful mind game. Think of them as psychological laws manipulators use as blueprints. 1. Confusion breeds control. Someone can confuse your emotional or intellectual clarity. They create space for influence. Confused people are more compliant, more reliant, and more susceptible to suggestion. 2. Unpredictability equals power. The manipulator will switch between kindness and cruelty, approval and criticism. This keeps you guessing, constantly seeking validation, and never grounded in reality. 3. Control the frame. Control the game. The frame is the mental lens through which we interpret events. Mind gamers shape the narrative first, positioning themselves as the victim, the expert, or the prize. 4. False choice creates obedience. Offer only options that lead to the same outcome. It feels like free will, but the conclusion was designed long ago. 5. Silence is a weapon. Sometimes the most powerful message is none at all. Silent treatment, withheld answers, or strategic pauses create anxiety and make the target chase clarity from the very person who created the fog. Classic mind games and their hidden mechanics. Let's now dissect the most common mind games and how they work beneath the surface. 1. the push-pull game, also known as hot and cold. This is a strategy of emotional whiplash. The manipulator showers you with attention, then withdraws it suddenly and without explanation. Purpose: 2. Create emotional addiction. The highs are so high that the lows feel like personal failure. You crave the next push and tolerate the pull to get it. Psychological weapon: intermittent reinforcement. The same tactic used in gambling addiction. 2. The guilt trip: you never think about how I feel after all I've done for you. The manipulator plays the victim to provoke guilt-induced compliance. You feel responsible for their pain, so you adjust your behavior to stop it. Purpose: emotional leverage. Guilt makes people obedient because they agree, but because they want relief. 3. The invalidation game. That's not what happened. You're being too sensitive. You always overreact. This game discredits your reality until you begin to rely on theirs. It's psychological gaslighting wrapped in concern or logic. Purpose: cognitive destabilization. When you can't trust your mind, you turn to theirs. 4. The comparison trap. Why can't you be more like them? My ex never did this. By comparing you to an idealized version of someone else, the manipulator activates insecurity and makes you work harder to earn approval. Purpose: to erode self-worth and install the idea that you are not enough unless they say so. 5. The strategic disappearance. This can take the form of ghosting, stonewalling, or disappearing during moments of emotional vulnerability, only to return when it suits them. Purpose: to reset power. Your anxiety grows. You question your worth. Their return feels like relief, even reward. It's not random. It's timed. Where these games thrive, mind games are most effective in environments where trust is assumed, emotional stakes are high, and boundaries are unclear. This makes romantic relationships, family dynamics, workplaces, and friendships prime hunting grounds. In romantic relationships, these games masquerade as passion or testing love. In families, they wear the mask of tradition or concern. At work, they hide behind hierarchy and ambition. In friendships, they're cloaked in loyalty. The manipulator doesn't need dominance. They need influence, the ability to make you bend while thinking it was your choice. Why smart people fall for mind games. Intelligence is not immunity. In fact, smart individuals may fall more easily into mind games due to over-rationalizing intelligent minds. Seek patterns even when none exist. Manipulators exploit this by creating emotional riddles. Empathy. The desire to understand others can be weaponized against you. Ego. Believing I would never fall for that creates blind spots. The more you believe you're in control, the less likely you are to notice when you're being played. Defense against the dark art of mind games. To protect yourself, you must develop game awareness, the ability to recognize manipulation while it's happening and refuse to play. 1. Spot the pattern, not the actant. Get caught up in what they did. Ask how often it happens. One guilt trip is forgivable. A pattern is psychological warfare. 2. Use emotional tracking when you feel anxious, guilty, or insecure around someone. Ask, was this feeling planted? Your emotions are the footprints of a manipulator. 3. Refuse to play unwinnable games. When someone gives you a false choice or guilt-laden options, step out of the frame. Say, that's not a fair choice. Reset the dynamic. 4. Silence the puppet. Strings dent. Chase clarity from the person who created the confusion. Seek your own center. Validate your own emotions. This removes their leverage. 5. Call out the game gently or directly. Manipulators thrive in secrecy. If you can safely name the behavior, this feels like a guilt trip, or you're comparing me unfairly, the spell often breaks. Some will deny it. Others will retreat. But the game ends when the rules are exposed. No more playing along. Mind games are not childish antics. They are strategic operations that quietly steal agency, twist perceptions, and install control mechanisms where there should be mutual respect. They are subtle, persistent, and devastatingly effective until you see them. And now you do. Every move from here on is yours. The manipulator may still try. They may lay traps, offer bait, test your limits, but they no longer move unseen. Your awareness is your exit. Your clarity is your armor. From this moment on, you are not a player in someone else's game. You are the board. You are the rule maker. You do not chase, you choose, and that changes everything. Chapter 7. The Hypnotic Blueprint, Using Trance to Influence and Control. There is a door inside every Minda, hidden passage between wakefulness and sleep, awareness and surrender, thought and suggestion. Most people walk past it every day, unaware of its existence. But the manipulator, the mental architect, knows this door well. They open it with precision, walk through it without noise, and leave behind whispers dressed as your own thoughts. This door is called Trance. It is the foundation of hypnotic control. Far from swinging watches and stage acts, true hypnosis is subtle, sophisticated, and woven seamlessly into everyday life. It is not about making someone cluck like a chicken. It's about bypassing critical thinking, slipping past mental defenses, and planting ideas that feel self-generated. When used ethically, hypnosis can heal. When weaponized, it becomes one of the most powerful tools in dark psychology. This chapter explores the hypnotic blueprint, how trance is induced, how influence is embedded, and how behavior can be subtly shaped without the subject even realizing it. What is hypnosis, really? At its core, hypnosis is a state of focused attention, combined with heightened suggestibility. The conscious mind recedes, allowing the subconscious to become more open and responsive to input. In this state, logic becomes pliable, resistance is reduced. Imagination becomes reality. Suggestions bypass critical analysis. This trance-like state is not unusual. In fact, most people enter light trances multiple times a day, while scrolling endlessly through social media, while driving up familiar route and forgetting the journey, while watching a movie and forgetting it's not real. These moments prove that trance is not it's natural, and manipulators exploit this natural state to embed control. The hypnotic sequence blueprint of control. Successful hypnotic influence follows a sequence structured yet flexible, designed to disarm awareness and install suggestion. 1. Induction. Opening the door. The first step is guiding the subject into a relaxed, focused state. This can be overt, close your eyes and breathe deeply, or covert via conversation, music, eye contact. Common induction methods include monotone rhythm. A steady voice creates comfort and lowers defenses. Progressive relaxation, guiding the subject to relax body parts, one by one. Distraction and overload. Confusing the conscious mind to distract it, while suggestion slips in. In real-world manipulation, induction may look like a calming, repetitive conversation, a mesmerizing voice, an emotionally charged story that absorbs full attention. The goal is to reduce conscious resistance, to make the gatekeeper drowsy, so new ideas can sneak in. Point 2. Deepening, strengthening the trance. Once the door is open, the manipulator deepens the subject's focus. This often involves counting down 10, 9, 8. Closing parenthesis. Imagery. You're walking down a quiet path, anchoring sensations, repeating words like deeper, sinking, floating. In dark psychology, deepening may involve repeating key phrases to lull the listener, using body language, mirroring to build trust, drawing the listener into emotionally intense narratives that reduce self-awareness. Once the trance deepens, the subject becomes more emotionally reactive and cognitively suggestible. 3. Suggestion. Planting the thought. Now comes the moment of implantation. The manipulator introduces ideas, commands, or beliefs structured to sound like internal realizations. Effective suggestions are simple and affirmative. You are ready to let go. Embedded within stories, there was a woman just like you, and when she chose to move on, everything changed. Wrapped in implication, as you continue listening, you might notice how clarity begins to return. These suggestions may alter identity or the kind of person who doesn't hesitate. Change perception, the past is fading like a dream. Trigger actions when you wake up tomorrow, you'll feel the urge to call. The art lies in making the suggestion feel self-chosen. That's the hypnotic illusion. You think you decided it. 4. Reinforcement, locking the thought in place to make suggestions stick. They must be reinforced. This is done by repetition, emotional association, linking to familiar values because you care about your future. This choice feels right. In manipulation, reinforcement often happens outside the trance, repeating the same message in different contexts, creating triggers that recall the trance state, a word, a touch, a tone, celebrating behavior that aligns with the suggestion, like hypnotic glue. Reinforcement ensures the idea feels natural and becomes automatic. Covert hypnosis. Influence without awareness. Overt hypnosis requires consent. Covert hypnosis, the kind used in persuasion, manipulation, and dark psychology, does not. Here's how it's used in daily life. 1. Hypnotic language. Patterns. These include embedded commands. You might find it easy to agree with me. Double binds. Would you like to begin the change now, or in a few minutes? Truisms plus suggestion. You're sitting here reading this, and that means you're ready to explore new truths. They slip past conscious analysis and get stored as assumptions. 2. Storytelling and metaphor telling. Emotionally charged stories lowers resistance and activates the imagination, a gateway to the subconscious. The listener sees themselves in the story, and the embedded message becomes personal. 3. Mirroring and matching. Repeating someone's body language, tone, or pace builds rapport. Once trust is established, the manipulator can lead the conversation and shift behavior. This is the pace-led strategy. Match first, then guide. Hypnosis in strategic environments. Dark hypnotic techniques thrive in certain environments. Cult indoctrination, repetitive chanting, rituals, group focus, sleep deprivation. All heightened trance and suggestibility. Advertising, emotional imagery, repetition, seductive voices, and music bypass logic and speak to desire. Political rallies, rhythmic slogans, emotional speeches, and crowd dynamics induce collective trance. Toxic relationships, love bombing, gaslighting, and emotional extremes induce a trance-like attachment. These environments engineer hypnosis without calling it that, ethical line, or weapon of war. Like a knife, hypnosis can heal or harm. Therapists use it to help people quit smoking, resolve trauma, or reduce pain. But, in the wrong hands, it becomes a weapon to erase identity, to install obedience, to control without detection. The difference is consent. Hypnosis without awareness is mental trespass, and dark psychologists don't knock, they slip in. Defense against hypnotic manipulation. The structure of the hypnotic blueprint empowers you to resist its effects. 1. Raise conscious awareness. The more present you are, the harder it is to be hypnotized. Disengage autopilot. Ask, what is this person really trying to say? 2. Spot repetitive language. Someone repeats phrases, patterns, or metaphors. Pause. Ask yourself, why this pattern? What idea are they embedding? 3. Interrupt the trance. Change your posture. Ask a sharp question. Disrupt the rhythm. Hypnosis requires flow. Break the flow. Break the spell. 4. Monitor emotional shifts. Sudden mood changes are signs you're being led. Step back and ask, was that emotion manor-induced? The door is still yours. The hypnotic blueprint is real. It is used by therapists, advertisers, cults, politicians, partners, and predators. It can shape, mold, and even override conscious thought. But it is not unstoppable. The key is awareness. When you understand the structure of trance, you don't fall into it to watch it. You notice the rhythm. You question the story. You interrupt the suggestion. And that small act of awareness is a fortress. Your mind is a room with a door. That door leads to your subconscious. Some will try to enter it uninvited. But now, you know the layout. Now, you have the blueprint. And from this moment forward, you keep the key. Chapter 8. Brainwashing Tactics, Erasing and Reprogramming the Mind. Imagine waking up one day and no longer recognizing your own thoughts. Your values feel alien. Your memories seem unreliable. Your sense of self has shifted, but you can't pinpoint when or how. This isn't science fiction. It's the silent result of something chillingly real. Brainwashing, the systematic erasure and reprogramming of the human mind. Brainwashing, or coercive persuasion, is not about convincing. It's about breaking down the mind, stripping it of its identity, and reconstructing it in the manipulator's image. This is psychological warfare at its most invasive and methodical, often occurring over weeks, months, or years, so subtly that the victim doesn't notice the change until the damage is irreversible. In this chapter, we expose how brainwashing works, the stages of mental hijacking, and the exact tactics used by cult leaders, authoritarian regimes, abusers, and psychological predators to rewrite reality. Understanding it is not just self-protection, it's liberation. What is brainwashing? Brainwashing is the deliberate destruction of a person's independent thinking and beliefs, followed by implanting new, externally imposed beliefs in their place. Unlike persuasion, which works with the subject's consent, brainwashing bypasses consent altogether. It aims to eliminate resistance by systematically breaking down existing identity, creating psychological dependency, imposing a new reality as truth. This isn't about changing minds, it's about replacing them. Historical roots of brainwashing. The term brainwashing gained popularity during the Cold War, when reports emerged of American prisoners of war in Korea returning with pro-communist beliefs. Further studies into Chinese thought reform programs and Soviet re-education camps revealed the chilling depth of these tactics. But brainwashing didn't begin with governments. Religions, cults, corporations, and abusive partners have long used similar methods to gain total psychological control over their subjects. The technology has changed, but the core methods remain the same. The three-phase model of brainwashing. Brainwashing operations follow a three-phase blueprint. Regardless of whether the environment is a cult compound, an abusive relationship, a prison camp, or a digital echo chamber. Phase 1. Unfreezing. Breaking down the mind. The first step is to shatter the target's psychological stability. This can involve isolation, removing them from family, friends, or outside opinions, sleep deprivation, disrupting mental clarity and resilience, emotional abuse, constant criticism, humiliation or confusion, disorientation, conflicting messages, lies, or abrupt rule changes, information overload, bombarding the subject with propaganda, fake facts, or conflicting messages. The goal is to induce mental fatigue, emotional confusion, and identity erosion once the individual can no longer trust their emotions or recall who they were. The manipulator introduces the idea that only they have the answers. This is the psychological collapse, the erasure of the old self. Phase 2. Changing. Installing the new identity. Once the subject's defenses are destroyed, the reprogramming begins. The manipulator introduces new belief systems, often binary, good versus evil, us versus them, rituals or repetition, chanting, routines, or slogans to create familiarity and embed new ideas. Reward-punishment systems, praise for obedience, pain for resistance. Groupthink, making the subject feel accepted only when they conform. This phase reconstructs identity, not just thoughts, but feelings, habits, relationships, and values. Over time, The subject begins parroting new phrases, accepting new logic, and even policing themselves internally to avoid punishment. The old self becomes the enemy. The new identity feels safer. Even holy. Phase 3, refreezing, locking in the change. A final stage is reinforcement, ensuring the new identity sticks. This is done by removing exit routes. Shame, threats, fear, or dependence keep the subject from leaving. Creating rituals, daily practices that reinforce the new belief system. Demonizing outsiders, portraying anyone who questions the new identity as dangerous. Rewarding loyalty, privileges, status, or affection, tied to submission. Eventually, the subject internalizes the beliefs so deeply that they will defend them even if it means hurting themselves or others. This is not loyalty. It's psychological imprisonment. Tactical tools of brainwashing here are the most effective and commonly used tactical tools used to erase and replace minds. 1. Thought-stopping techniques. Whenever doubt arises, the subject is taught to suppress it using mantras, prayers, or distraction phrases. Example: doubt is the devil. Stay focused. It's just your old self talking. Purpose: prevent critical thinking and preserve the implanted belief system. Point 2. Loaded language. Cults and ideologies create in-group language, new definitions, abbreviations, or trigger terms that shape thinking. Examples: suppressive person, Scientology, fake news, political propaganda, sheeple, usiversism. Framing language is the coding of thought. Change the language, and you change how the subject thinks. 3. Emotional conditioning, associating negative emotions with old beliefs and positive emotions with new beliefs, ensures emotional obedience. Example: anger when thinking about outsiders, relief when following group rules. This creates emotional reflexes that punish disobedient thoughts automatically. 4. Fear and scarcity, fear of punishment, eternal damnation, loss of love, or exclusion keeps the subject frozen in place. Scarcity of time, resources, or options makes submission feel like survival. Point 5. Control of information by limiting what the subject reads, hears, or watches. Manipulators ensure the only reality the subject knows is the one they provide. This is common in cults, restricted media, authoritarian governments, censorship, toxic relationships, emotional isolation. 6. Surveillance and confession, constant observation. Even implied creates self-censorship. Encouraging confessions fosters guilt and further submission. In digital environments, this is done through algorithms that track preferences, group chats that shame, NAN-conformity, public callouts for dissent. Who uses brainwashing and why? Brainwashing tactics are deployed wherever control is prioritized over consent. Cults and religious sects, to maintain blind loyalty to the leader. Terrorist organizations, to radicalize and recruit. Authoritarian regimes, to eliminate dissent and foster obedience. Toxic partners or family members, to make escape feel impossible. Corporations or organizations, to maintain dominance over employees or members. What unites all these environments is a desire for total psychological ownership. Why brainwashing works: even the strongest minds can fall prey to brainwashing, because it exploits natural human needs. Belonging, meaning, safety, wears down resistance slowly, not overnight. Uses your own mind against you. You are not weak for falling into it. You are human. And the human mind, when isolated, disoriented, and afraid, will cling to anything that promises relief of in chains. Signs you're being or have been brainwashed. You can't explain your beliefs clearly, but feel strong emotions defending them. You avoid certain topics instinctively, as if they're dangerous. You feel anxious or guilty when questioning your current beliefs. You've cut ties with people who once supported you because they don't get it. You feel a before and after version of yourself, but the shift seems fuzzy. If you recognize these signs, pause. You are not broken. You are waking up. Reversing the brainwash. Escaping brainwashing requires rebuilding your mind, piece by piece. 1. Expose yourself to dissonance. Seek out opposing view. To agree, but to retrain critical thinking. 2. Reclaim your language. Stop using the manipulator's terms. They are mental software. Delete and replace. 3. Reconnect with old anchors, friends, music, hobbies, or memories from before the indoctrination can help reignite your original identity. 4. Journal. Your thoughts. Writing bypasses censorship. It gives shape to emotions and helps you see where your mind has been altered. 5. Get support. Deprogramming is painful. Community, therapy, or support groups are vital. Your mind, reclaimed. Brainwashing is not about forced belief. It is about erasing the capacity to disbelieve. It turns free humans into mental hostages, not through chains, but through ideas. But here's the truth. They don't want you to know. Your mind is not gone. It is buried, and it can be reclaimed. Every doubt you feel, every memory that resurfaces, every word you write that doesn't match their script, that is your mind knocking from the inside. You are not what they made you. You are not the thoughts they implanted. You are the one who remembers. You are the one who questions. And now, you are the one who chooses. That is freedom. And it begins here. Chapter 9. Gaslighting and Reality Distortion. Breaking Sanity by Design. In the dark theater of psychological manipulation, few acts are more diabolical than gaslighting. It's not about lying to you, it's about convincing you that your truth never existed. It's not about denial, it's about replacing your reality with one that serves the manipulator. Gaslighting is the art of dismantling sanity, brick by brick, thought by thought, until your internal compass spins uncontrollably. It is not a mistake. It is a design, a weapon used by those who seek not just obedience, but dominion over your mind. This chapter unravels the chilling mechanics behind gaslighting, explains how it is systematically used to warp perception, and exposes its long-term effects on mental and emotional stability. This is not about drama or disagreements. It's about psychological warfare, a silent, invisible war against truth. What is gaslighting? Gaslighting is a deliberate, sustained psychological strategy that makes a person doubt their memories, perceptions, and even sanity. It derives its name from the 1938 play, Gaslight, where a manipulative husband dims the lights in the house and denies it when his wife notices, convincing her she's going mad. But gaslighting is not confined to fiction. It thrives in toxic relationships, authoritarian systems, cults, corporate hierarchies, and even media and politics. It's about mental colonization, rewriting someone's internal script so thoroughly that they become dependent on the manipulator to understand reality. The psychological blueprint of gaslighting. Gaslight follows a distinct, strategic process. It is not random cruelty. It is psychological engineering. 1. Stage 1. Laying the foundation of doubt. It begins subtly. The manipulator questions small, seemingly insignificant things. You're misremembering. That's not how it happened. You always get things wrong. At first, it sounds like disagreement, but the goal is to insert a seed of doubt to make you question your mental clarity. Once the seed takes root, the gaslighter nurtures it with every interaction. 2. Stage 2. Eroding confidence. The attacks grow more frequent and bold. You're imagining things. Everyone else thinks you're overreacting. Why can't you ever be rational? They start reframing emotional reactions as irrational. They challenge your instincts, your logic, your memories. The more you defend yourself, the deeper you fall into their frame. The victim, desperate to make sense of the chaos, starts relying on the gaslighter for clarity. Point 3. Stage 3. Isolation and control. Once internal confusion is established, the gaslighter moves to external isolation. undermining your relationships your friends are toxic, painting allies as enemies your family just wants to control you, questioning your sanity maybe you should talk to someone something's off. This is tactical isolation. Without support, the victim becomes trapped in a hall of mirrors, where every reflection is distorted and every exit is hidden. 4. Stage 4. Total reality override. In the final stage, the gaslighter becomes the sole narrator of reality. They tell you who you are. They interpret your emotions. They explain your memories back to you. Wrong. By now, the victim has internalized the manipulator's worldview. They distrust their own thoughts and often blame themselves for everything. This is not influence. This is mental hijacking. Techniques of the gaslighter. Let us now expose the specific tactics gaslighters use to execute this psychological attack. 2. 1. Denial of the obvious. Even when confronted with facts, they will say, "That never happened. You're making things up. I never said that." This causes cognitive dissonance. The victim starts to distrust what they see and hear. 2. Rewriting history. The gaslighter tells a different version of past events and insists it's true. Example: You yelled at me last night. Them: No, you were the one screaming. I was calm. Repeated enough. This alters memory, because memories are malleable under emotional stress. 3. Emotional invalidation. The manipulator dismisses or mocks your feelings. You're too sensitive. You're being dramatic. You're always the victim. This teaches the victim to suppress emotional responses, making them easier to control. 4. Projection. They accuse you of what they're doing. You're lying. You're the manipulative one. You're gaslighting me. This turns the victim defensive and confused, reversing blame and obscuring the truth. 5. Triangulation. They bring in other people, real or imaginary, to reinforce their narrative. Even your sister agrees with me. My friends think you're crazy. This external validation strengthens the gaslighter's frame and amplifies your self-doubt. 6. Minimization of an. When caught, the gaslighter downplays the impact. You're overreacting. It was just a joke. You're too emotional to see the truth. This invalidates your experience and restores their control. The psychological consequences. Gaslighting doesn't just hurt feelings, it breaks minds. Over time, victims experience chronic self-doubt. Am I the problem? Anxiety and panic. The mind constantly seeks clarity in chaos. Depression, feeling isolated, helpless, and lost. Cognitive fog, trouble concentrating or trusting thoughts. Emotional numbness. As a defense, victims shut down emotionally. Identity erosion. The victim loses confidence in who they are. This is not accidental. It is the design. Gas works by creating dependency. The more the victim breaks, the more they seek the gaslighter to feel normal again. Where gaslighting thrives. Gaslighting is not limited to personal relationships. It is a favored tool of control systems everywhere. In romantic relationships, often masked as passion or concern, it becomes a tool of control, forcing one partner to abandon their reality in favor of the others. In families, a parent might gaslight a child to avoid accountability that never happened, or to enforce control through guilt. In the workplace, toxic bosses use gaslighting to manipulate performance reviews, deny abuse, and keep employees submissive. In politics and media, by constantly shifting narratives, rewriting history, and denying observable reality, public figures can gaslight entire populations, turning objective facts into opinions. How? To detect gaslighting, it can be incredibly difficult to see gaslighting from within. But here are some warning signs. You often second-guess your memory. You apologize constantly, even when unsure why. You feel confused after conversations with a specific person. You've lost trust in your instincts or judgment. You isolate yourself out of shame or self-doubt. You feel like you've changed but can't explain how. If multiple signs resonate, it may not be you. It may be them rewriting your reality one denial at a time. Reclaiming reality. Escaping gaslighting requires rebuilding your internal compass. It is not easy, but it is possible. 1. Document everything. Write down what was said, what happened, how you felt. Gaslighters rely on your forgetfulness and emotional fog. Your notes will become your evidence. 2. Reaffirm your perception. Tell yourself, my feelings are valid, my memory matters, my experience is real. Repetition breaks the spell. 3. Seek outside perspective. A trusted friend, therapist, or mentor can reflect reality back to you when your own sense of it is shattered. 4. Set boundaries. Even emotional boundaries, like ending conversations when they get manipulative, protect your clarity. 5. Educate yourself. Learn the patterns. Once you see the tactics, they lose their power. Gaslighting thrives in silence. Knowledge is the antidote. Reclaiming sanity is a revolution. Gaslighting is not just a lie. It is a strategy to erase truth, and in doing so, erase the self. But once you name it, you disrupt it. Once you see the pattern, you break it. Once you reclaim your perception, you reclaim your power. No one gets to define reality for you. No one gets to rewrite your memories. No one gets to make you doubt the truth of your experience. Your sanity is your sovereignty. Your perception is your property. And now, you see through the fog. The game is over. You are not confused. You are awake. Chapter 10. The Empath's Curse. Why Narcissists Target the Emotionally Intelligent. There is a tragic irony woven into the fabric of human connection. The very qualities that make someone deeply compassionate, nurturing, and emotionally intelligent are often the same traits that make them a prime target for narcissists and psychological predators. Empaths, those who feel what others feel, who intuit unspoken pain, who listen beyond words, are gifted with an extraordinary emotional radar. But that gift, unguarded, becomes a curse in the presence of manipulation. To the narcissist, the empath is not a partner. They are a source of validation, a source of energy, a source of control. The narcissist feeds off attention and admiration, and the empath, with their innate desire to help, understand, and heal, walks unknowingly into a trap of emotional exploitation. This chapter explores the haunting dynamic between narcissists and empaths, the predator and the healer, and explains why this psychological dance is so common, so damaging, and so difficult to escape. Who is the empath? An empath is not simply someone who cares. Empaths have an extraordinary capacity to feel the emotions of others as if they were their own. They possess high emotional sensitivity, awareness, a strong drive to nurture, and help in aversion to conflict, a tendency to absorb others' emotional pain. Empaths are emotional mirrors. When others hurt, they hurt. When others are joyful, they feel uplifted. This emotional synchrony makes them wonderful friends, partners, counselors, and, unfortunately, ideal targets for those who weaponize emotion. Who is the narcissist? Narcissists present a facade of confidence and charm, but beneath the surface lies a fragile ego, a hunger for attention, and a deep inability to feel empathy. They crave admiration and praise, control and dominance, validation of their superiority, but they fear exposure. They loathe vulnerability, and they need others to reflect back the image they want to project. This is where the empath enters the picture, not as a threat, but as a tool. The magnetism between empaths and narcissists, the attraction between empaths and narcissists, is not accidental. It is energetic, psychological, and deeply patterned. 1. The empath feels the narcissist's hidden wound. Beneath the narcissist's bravado is deep, emotional trauma, often stemming from childhood neglect, shame, or conditional love. The empath senses this unhealed pain. They don't just see the masks, they see the little boy or girl behind it, crying for love. And so the empath begins their mission, to heal, to fix, to love them whole. But this mission is doomed. Because the narcissist is not looking for healing. They are looking for supply. 2. The narcissist mirrors the empath's ideal at the start. The narcissist can be everything the empath dreamed of. Charming, attentive, vulnerable, passionate. This phase, often called love bombing, overwhelms the empath's heart. It feels like destiny, but it's a performance, a hook. And once the empath is fully invested, the narcissist begins the slow, strategic erosion of their identity. 3. The empath explains away the abuse. Empaths are wired to understand, to see both sides, to forgive. So when the narcissist starts criticizing with hope, the empath responds with compassion. They're hurting. They don't mean it. If I just love them harder, they'll change. This is the empath's curse, to rationalize pain as the price of love. The cycle of narcissistic abuse. The narcissist-empath dynamic follows a predictable and devastating cycle. 2-1. Idealization. The hook. The narcissist showers the empath with affection, praise, and attention. They mirror the empath's desires. They create a fantasy. The empath, feeling seen and understood, bonds quickly and deeply. 2. Devaluation. The confusion. Once the narcissist senses control, the tone shifts. They begin criticizing the empath's sensitivity, withdrawing emotionally, comparing them to others, blaming them for everything. The empath scrambles to fix things. They question themselves. They take the blame. 3. Discard. The collapse. When the empath no longer serves the narcissist's needs, or begins to resist, they are discarded abruptly or cruelly. The empath is left shattered, confused, and hollow, wondering what they did wrong. 4. Hoovering. The recycle. If the empath starts to heal, the narcissist may return, apologizing, promising change, reigniting the fantasy. Many empaths fall for it again, because hope is their drug. Why the empath doesn't leave. People often ask, why don't they just walk away? But leaving a narcissist for an empath is like abandoning a wounded child. The empath doesn't see abuse, they see pain. They stay not out of weakness, but out of misguided strength, the belief that love can fix what trauma created, and the narcissist uses that belief as a leash. How narcissists drain empaths. This dynamic is not a partnership. It's a parasitic relationship. The narcissist takes empathy, but offers no empathy in return, demands loyalty, but betrays it, constantly uses affection as manipulation, turns every conversation into a power play, makes the empath question their own emotions. Over time, the empath becomes anxious, depressed, isolated, numb, confused about their identity. They have given so much that they forget who they were before. Breaking the bond. Escaping a narcissist, especially for an empath, is not just a breakup, it's a liberation. It requires unlearning, grieving, and reclaiming. 1. See the pattern. Recognize that the cycle isn't about love, it's about control. 2. Feel. Don't fix. Empaths must learn to feel compassion without trying to rescue. The narcissist's pain is not your responsibility. 3. Rebuild. Boundaries. Boundaries are not walls, they are filters for energy. The empath must learn to say, that's not okay. Your pain doesn't give you the right to hurt me. I deserve emotional safety. 4. Seek mirrors, not masks. Healthy relationships reflect you, challenge you, and honor your emotions. The empath must stop choosing projects and start choosing partners. The empowered empath. Empathy is not the curse. Lack of boundaries is. When an empath learns to balance compassion with discernment, they become unmanipulable. They can still feel deeply, but they do not absorb. They can still help, but not at the cost of themselves. The empowered empath trusts their instincts, honors their needs, sets firm boundaries, says no without guilt, stops trying to fix what refuses to heal, and, most importantly, they see narcissists for what they are, hungry ghosts looking for mirrors to admire themselves in. From curse to power. The empath's curse is real, but it is also reversible. The same heart that once made you vulnerable can become your strength. The same intuition that led you into traps can become your compass. The same love that was used against you can become a force that restores you. You don't need to stop being an empath. You need to start being your own. Love yourself the way you tried to love them. Protect yourself the way you tried to protect them. Believe yourself the way you believed them. That is how the curse is broken. That is how the cycle ends. That is how you become free. Chapter 11. Weaponized Language. How Words Become Psychological Bullets. Sticks and stones may break bones, but words wound deeper, last longer, and when sharpened into weapons, can enslave the mind. Language is not just communication, it is control. In the realm of dark psychology, it becomes the scalpel and the sword, the lock and the key, the gun and the trigger. Weaponized language is not about expressing ideas. It's about engineering belief, manipulating emotion, and shaping perception without ever raising a hand. We often underestimate the true power of words, but tyrants, abusers, cult leaders, propagandists, and manipulators never do. They understand that a well-placed phrase can override logic, instill fear, destroy identity, or manufacture loyalty. They use language not to inform, but to ultimately, to dominate. In this chapter, we unveil how language is used to manipulate thought, obscure truth, manufacture obedience, and psychologically devastate its targets. Prepare to see words not as passive sounds, but as loaded weapons, because in the hands of a manipulator, every sentence is a strategy. The hidden structure of influence. Every word carries more than its dictionary definition. It carries context, tone, intent, and emotional charge. Manipulators choose their words like a sniper selects bullets, for maximum psychological impact. To understand weaponized language, we must first recognize its building blocks. Framing, how something is presented, shapes how it is perceived. Repetition, the more often something is said, the more real it feels. Emotive triggers, words designed to bypass logic and hijack emotion. Ambiguity, language that is deliberately vague to allow reinterpretation or deny. Accountability, these tactics form the foundation of linguistic manipulation. The anatomy of a psychological bullet. Let's break down the anatomy of a weaponized word or phrase. Targeting, the manipulator identifies a vulnerability, insecurity, doubt, calibration. They select emotionally charged language tailored to that vulnerability. Delivery, they insert the phrase subtly or forcefully, depending on the goal. Amplification, they repeat it, reinforce it, or attach emotional pain or pleasure to it. Just like a real weapon, the goal is penetration, to pierce the target's psychological armor and trigger a desired reaction. Forms of weaponized language. 1. Gaslighting phrases. These are used to distort a person's sense of reality and weaken their confidence. You're imagining things. You're overreacting. No one else has a problem with this but you. You're being too sensitive. These phrases seem innocuous, but over time, they create cognitive dissonance, training the victim to doubt their own thoughts and memories. 2. Emotional anchors. Words or phrases that are repeatedly paired with pain or pleasure become emotional triggers. Example, a narcissist repeatedly says you're just like your father every time you assert yourself. Eventually, that phrase becomes a shame button silencing you before you even speak. 3. Guilt traps. Language can be engineered to induce guilt and force compliance. After all I've done for you, you clearly don't care. If you really loved me, you would. These phrases shift blame, manipulate emotion, and create a false moral framework that benefits the manipulator. 4. Dehumanizing labels. One of the oldest tactics in political and psychological warfare is labeling the enemy. They're animals. You're just crazy. You're such a drama queen. They're terrorists. Labels reduce complexity and strip away empathy. They make it easier to justify abuse, neglect, or violence. 5. Loaded questions and assumptions. Weaponized. Questions are structured to trap you regardless of your answer. Why are you so insecure? When did you stop being honest? Why do you always ruin things? These questions contain presupposition. Answering them legitimizes the false claim embedded within them. 6. Love. Bombing and flattery. As control-even positive language can be weaponized. You're the only one who understands me. You're perfect for me. I've never met anyone like you, said excessively early in a relationship. These statements build a dependency trap, making it harder to detach when red flags emerge. 7. Silence and non-response. As language, what's left unsaid can be just as potent. A manipulator may use silent treatment, withholding validation, ominous pauses, dismissive shrugs. This is nonverbal weaponization used to trigger anxiety, insecurity, and a desire to win back approval. The neuropsychology behind its words: trigger emotional reactions because the brain doesn't process them as abstract symbols. It reacts as if they were physical experiences. Insults activate the amygdala, our emotional threat center. Praise activates the dopamine system. Reward and bonding. Repetition creates neural reinforcement, making a phrase feel true, even if false. This is why propaganda works. This is why trauma from verbal abuse can last longer than physical scars. Words can literally rewire the brain. Where weaponized language thrives. 1. In personal relationships, abusers use language to control partners, disarm boundaries, create self-doubt, maintain power dynamics. This happens slowly, so the victim doesn't realize the cage is being built around them. 2. In cults and high control groups, cults create linguistic prisons, unique terminology, binary language, good versus evil, thought-terminating cliches. Everything happens for a reason. This limits free thought and replaces independent language with group script. 3. In politics and propaganda, authoritarian regimes and extremist ideologies use nationalistic slogans, euphemisms for violence, collateral damage, demonizing language, illegals, vermin, enemy of the state. Such language manufactures consent, dehumanizes, and stabilizes power. 4. In corporate and bureaucratic environments, think of terms like human capital, downsizing, reallocation of resources. These euphemisms sanitize harm and distance the speaker from ethical responsibility. How to defend against linguistic manipulation. 1. Recognize emotional reactions. If a word or phrase creates a strong emotional spike, pause. Ask, is this my feeling or a reaction they're trying to elicit? 2. Dissect the sentence. Break it down. What is being implied? What is being left unsaid? What assumptions are being inserted? Language is like a spell. Breaking it apart dissolves its power. 3. Refuse to accept the frame. If someone asks, why are you always selfish? Respond with, that's not a fair question. Let's talk about what's really happening. Change the frame. Own the narrative. 4. Reclaim your language. Use precise, grounded language to describe your experience. Instead of, maybe I'm just crazy, say, I'm feeling overwhelmed and confused, and I want clarity. Naming things correctly is an act of power. Rewriting the inner script. The most dangerous effect of weaponized language is that it becomes internalized. The phrases you hear over and over eventually become your inner voice. I'm too sensitive. I always mess things up. No one would believe me. These are not your thoughts. These are implanted scripts and they must be rewritten. Create new affirmations. My feelings are valid. I don't owe anyone my silence. Clarity begins with speaking truth. Words can hurt, but they can also heal. You just have to change the source. From targets to warriors, weaponized language is real. It is used in subtle conversations and national speeches, in homes and in headlines, in boardrooms and bedrooms. But awareness is armor. Once you see the strategy behind the sentence, you don't flinch, you analyze. Once you recognize the emotional payload, you don't absorb it to diffuse it. Once you reclaim your voice, you don't echo others, you write your own script. Words are tools. They can imprison, but they can also liberate. So sharpen your awareness, not your tongue. Let your truth be louder than their tricks. Let your clarity cut through their camouflage. And remember, in the war of words, your voice is your weapon. Use it wisely. Chapter 12. Social Engineering, Psychological Hacking in the Digital Age. The most dangerous hacker of the 21st century doesn't need code to crack your world. They don't use malware or brute force. Instead, they exploit the most vulnerable system ever created, the human mind. In an era where firewalls and encryption protect our data, social engineers bypass the digital barriers and go straight for the source you. Through deception, manipulation, and strategic influence, social engineers weaponize psychology to gain access to information, systems, and people, all while leaving minimal trace. Their tools are not lines of code, they are persuasion, fear, urgency, and trust. This chapter uncovers the hidden battlefield where psychological manipulation meets modern technology. You'll learn how today's predators hack not your devices, but your decisions, and how understanding their tactics is the first line of defense in a world where every click could be a trap. What is social engineering? At its core, social engineering is psychological manipulation for the purpose of gaining access to data, to systems, to influence, or to behavior. In contrast to traditional hacking, which attacks machines, social engineering attacks the user. It leverages the most common human traits: curiosity, trust, fear, and habit, to trick individuals into revealing confidential information, or taking actions that compromise security. Its con artistry digitized, its influence tactics industrialized, its psychological warfare optimized for the internet. Why? Social engineering works. The success of social engineering lies in one terrifying fact. Humans are the weakest link in any security system, and no firewall can block a well-timed lie. Social engineers prey on cognitive biases, for example, confirmation bias, authority bias, emotional states, for example, urgency, fear, flattery, routine behavior, for example, habitual clicking, multitasking, desire for social connection, for example, helping others. Avoiding conflict, they create scenarios designed to bypass critical thinking and engage emotional or instinctive responses. The moment you react instead of reason therein. The 4 pillars of social engineering. Nearly every social engineering attack follows a psychological blueprint composed of 4 stages. 1. Information gathering, reconnaissance before launching the attack. The social engineer collects intelligence. This includes public social media posts, job titles, and roles, company hierarchies, email addresses, and phone numbers, behavioral patterns. This is often done using open-source intelligence ascent, which is freely available online. The goal is to build a believable context. Example: a scammer sees a LinkedIn post congratulating someone on a promotion and sends a fake congratulatory message with a malicious link. 2. Building trust, pretexting. Here, the attacker crafts a false identity and backstory, known as a pretext, to create a believable interaction. They might pose as IT support, a bank representative, a colleague, a potential employer, a government agent. The pretext must sound legitimate as urgency or authority. Exploit the target's expectations. Example: hi, this is Sarah from the help. We noticed unusual activity on your account and need to verify your login details immediately. 3. Exploitation, the hook. Once the target is engaged and emotionally primed, the social engineer delivers the call to action. This could be clicking a link, downloading an attachment, revealing a password, sending money, allowing remote access. At this stage, emotion overrides logic. Fear, trust, or urgency clouds judgment, then the victim complies. 4. Execution and exit, covering tracks the attacker, completes their objective, often in minutes, and disappears. Many victims don't realize they've been manipulated until much later, if ever. By the time the damage is discovered, the engineer is gone, and the system or person is compromised. Real-world examples of psychological hacking. 1. Phishing. Attacks. Phishing is one of the most common forms of social engineering, using fake emails or websites to steal information. Psychological triggers used. Fear. Your account has been suspended. Urgency. Click here to confirm in 15 minutes. Or lose access. Authority. Your boss needs this invoice reviewed. 2. Romance scams. Social engineers exploit loneliness by forming fake online relationships, then requesting money or favors. Tactics: flattery and emotional bonding. Isolation from support networks. Victim blaming and guilt manipulation. 3. Baiting. This involves offering something enticing like free software, downloads, or USB drives to trick users into installing malware. Triggers: curiosity, greed, seeking. Behavior. 4. CEO fraud, business email compromise. Attackers impersonate executives or high-ranking employees to pressure others into transferring funds or data. Tactics: impersonation of authority or pressure. Scenarios: professional, tone, and insider. Lingo. The psychology behind it all. 1. Authority bias. We are wired to comply with figures of authority. Attackers exploit this by mimicking power, for example, using government logos, military language, or manager titles. 2. Reciprocity. People feel obligated to return a favor. A scammer might offer free help or information first, then request a small favor. 3. Scarcity and urgency. We're more likely to act when we think time is limited. Fake deadlines, countdowns, and expiring offers trigger impulsive behavior. 4. Social proof. Seeing that others have done something, for example, testimonials or fake likes, makes us more likely to do it too, even if it's unsafe. Social engineering. In the age of AI and deepfakes, technology has supercharged social engineering. Today, attackers can use AI-written phishing emails that mimic writing-style deepfake audio and video to impersonate voices or faces. Automated bots to create mass deception. At scale. Imagine receiving a voicemail that sounds exactly like your boss, asking you to approve a wire transfer. It's not science fiction. It's happening now, as the tools evolve. So must our awareness and skepticism. How to protect yourself. 1. Verify identities. Someone asks for sensitive information. Pause. Verify their identity through a secondary channel. Don't trust names, emails, or caller IDs alone. 2. Resist emotional triggers. Before you click or act, stop and ask, why do I feel rushed, afraid, or excited? Manipulators use emotion to shut down logic. 3. Use multi-factor authentication, MFA, even if a password is stolen. MFA adds another layer of defense that social engineers can't easily bypass. 4. Limit what you share online. Don't give attackers fuel. Avoid posting sensitive information, like travel plans, birthdays, or organizational details, on social media. 5. Educate and train. Organizations must train staff regularly on phishing, pretexting, and real-world scenarios. Awareness is the strongest firewall. From passive target to active defender, you don't need to be paranoid. You need to be prepared. Social engineering preys on instinct. But once you understand the blueprint, how attackers create a sense of familiarity, authority, or urgency, you can interrupt the script. You become the anomaly they didn't expect, the variable they can't control, the mind they can't manipulate. Your mind is the firewall in the digital age. The most critical security system is not your software, it's your psychology. And every day, someone is testing for weakness. But the moment you start asking the right questions, the moment you pause instead of react, the moment you trust your instincts instead of the email, you're no longer the victim. You're the gatekeeper. Because in a world of psychological hackers, awareness is your encryption. Discernment is your password. and your mind is your defense system. Chapter 13. The Mirror Trap, Mimicry, and the Illusion of Trust. Imagine meeting someone new. They laugh when you laugh. They nod at the right times. They share your favorite movies, your political views, even your pet peeves. It's almost magically like you've known them forever. But something beneath that synchronicity doesn't sit right. Something feels too perfect. That's because it might be. You're not experiencing connection. You're experiencing manipulated reflection. You've walked into the mirror trap. In the world of dark psychology, mimicry is one of the most subtle and effective tactics for gaining trust, control, and influence. The manipulator studies you, then mirrors your behavior, values, and emotional tone to lower your defenses. It feels like intimacy, but it's imitation. It feels like rapport, but it's rehearsal. This is not the accidental resonance between two people. This is a conscious psychological operation. This chapter will reveal how manipulators weaponize mimicry to create the illusion of trust, how your brain is wired to respond to it, and how to break the spell before the mirror becomes a cage. The psychological power of mirroring. Humans are social creatures. Our brains are designed to detect familiarity, pattern, and synchronization. This is deeply encoded in our biology. Mirror neurons in the brain fire both when we act and when we observe someone else performing the same action. This is why yawning is contagious, why we empathize when we see others cry, and why shared body language creates rapport. We trust those who seem like us. This isn't vanity, it's survival wiring. Familiarity historically meant safety. Unfamiliarity meant potential threat. This is what makes mimicry so dangerous. It hijacks your instincts. It builds instant trust, not by earning it, but by imitating it. The mechanics of the mirror trap. The mirror trap is built in layers, carefully constructed through behavioral cues, verbal tactics, and emotional calibration. Here's how it works. 1. Behavioral mimicry. The manipulator subtly mirrors your body language, for example. Leaning in when you lean in, gestures, for example. Touching their face if you do, speech rhythm and tone, breathing patterns. This creates unconscious rapport. You feel at ease because the person reflects your nonverbal signals, activating a deep sense of connection. 2. Value echoing. They listen closely for your beliefs, preferences, and opinions, then parrot your views. I totally agree. I've always felt that way. Claim similar experiences that happened to me too. Share fabricated commonalities. You love jazz. It's my favorite. This is not honest alignment. It's calculated harmony. 3. Emotional mirroring. When you're excited, they're thrilled. When you're somber, they soften. They read your emotional state and adopt it. This isn't empathy. It's emotional camouflage, designed to blend into your inner world and bypass your skepticism. Why? It works. The neuroscience of trust. Your brain is trained to reward recognition and fear dissonance. When someone behaves like you, your brain lights up with oxytocin, bonding hormone, dopamine, pleasure and anticipation, serotonin, mood regulation. This chemical cocktail confirms the illusion. This person is safe. This person is me. But in truth, they are not you. They are your mirror, meticulously crafted to reflect what you want to see. Real world examples of the mirror trap. 1. Romantic manipulation. In toxic or narcissistic relationships, manipulators often start as ideal partners. They share every interest, mimic emotional vulnerability, and make you feel deeply seen. But this intense connection isn't real. It's the mirroring phase of love bombing. Once control is established, the mirror cracks, revealing manipulation beneath. 2. Cult recruitment. Cult leaders often mirror the fears, hopes, and language of their targets. They adopt the group's concerns and then position themselves as the solution. Don't you feel like the world doesn't understand you? We do. This mirroring creates a feeling of belonging, making it easier to indoctrinate followers 3. Corporate espionage and sales tactics in high-stakes, business or negotiation settings. Professional manipulators, con artists, some unethical salespeople, and intelligence agents use mimicry to build instant rapid disarm skepticism, lower resistance to persuasion. You are more likely to say yes to someone who feels familiar, even if it's a manufactured facade. The dark psychology behind mimicry. What makes mimicry so insidious is its moral invisibility. It doesn't look like abuse. It doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels nice, comfortable, safe. That's because mimicry doesn't confront, it seduces. It doesn't coerce, it invites. The manipulator doesn't overpower you. They become you and then guide you from within. Think of it like malware disguised as a trusted file. You open it willingly, not knowing it's programmed to take over. The dangers of false connection. The mirror trap leads to deep emotional consequences. False intimacy. You bond with a persona, not a person. Loss of self-trust. When the deception is revealed, you doubt your ability to judge others. Emotional dependence. You become addicted to the feeling of being seen, not realizing it was a performance. Isolation. When others warn you, you defend the manipulator because they understand you in ways no one else does. The deeper the reflection goes, the harder it is to shatter the illusion. How to spot a manipulative mirror. 1. Too good to be true. It probably is. If someone matches you too perfectly, too quickly, it's not authenticity. It's strategy. 2. Patterns. Not just moments. Occasional mirroring is normal, but a consistent, uncanny echo of your behavior and preferences should raise alarm bells. 3. Check for depth when you challenge them. Do they show their own beliefs or just mirror yours again? Authentic people hold tension. Manipulators dissolve it by agreeing with everything. 4. Watch for chameleon behavior. Do they change personality depending on who they're with? That's not adaptability. It's a lack of identity, a hallmark of strategic mimicry. Escaping the mirror trap. 1. Slow down the connection. Real intimacy takes time. Give relationships space to develop. If someone pushes for rapid closeness, ask, why the rush? 2. Ask disruptive questions. Break the mirroring rhythm. Ask unexpected, deep questions. See if their responses feel scripted or real. 3. Observe. Don't just feel. Pay attention to patterns. Are they constantly reflecting you, or do they reveal independent thoughts, contradictions, and opinions? 4. Validate yourself first. The best defense is self-trust. The more you seek validation externally, the more susceptible you are to being mirrored. Reflections aren't reality. The mirror trap is one of the most seductive weapons in the manipulator's arsenal. It doesn't take your freedom by force. It cops your trust. It doesn't storm your defenses. It waits inside, disguised as connection. But once you learn to recognize the difference between reflection and authenticity, between imitation and intimacy, the illusion breaks. You stop falling in love with mirrors. You stop mistaking imitation for understanding. You stop giving trust to those who only echo, never reveal. And most importantly, you stop looking for yourself in others, because you've already found yourself within. In a world of psychological reflections, clarity is the only mirror you need. Chapter 14. Breaking the Chains. How to identify and disarm dark psychology. Dark psychology doesn't begin with chains. It begins with whispers. A soft manipulation here, a twisted truth there. No screaming alarms, no flashing signs. Just a slow erosion of your confidence, your clarity, your control. Until one day, you wake up and realize you're not free. Whether it's in a toxic relationship, a high-pressure work environment, a cult-like group, or a manipulative friendship. Dark psychology thrives on your unawareness. The chains it uses are psychological, not physical. Guilt, fear, shame, confusion, these become the invisible locks that hold you hostage. This chapter is about awareness as liberation, about taking back your mind, about learning how to detect, decode, and disarm the tactics of dark psychology before they destroy your autonomy. Because once you can name the weapon, you're no longer its target, you're its match. The psychology of entrapment. To break free, we must first understand how we got trapped. Dark psychology doesn't work by brute force, it works by soft power, the ability to influence without resistance. The manipulators do not come with threats. They come with charm, reason, seduction, and moral pressure. Here's how it unfolds. Establish trust. The manipulator appears safe, likable, and aligned with your values. Infiltrate your boundaries. They start testing how much they can ask, take, or blame you for. Confuse your sense of self through gaslighting, guilt, or mirroring. They distort your inner voice. Control through emotion. They exploit your fear, empathy, or need for approval to get compliance. Each of these steps is subtle, often undetectable in the moment, but together, they form the psychological chains that bind you to the manipulator's will. Identifying the red flags. You don't need to be a psychologist to spot dark tactics. What you need is attention, intuition, and the courage to question the script. Below are the key warning signs that you are in the presence of a dark psychological strategy. 1. Chronic confusion. You constantly feel unsure, second-guess yourself, or can't explain why something feels off. This is often a result of gaslighting, where your perception of reality is being slowly altered. If someone makes you doubt what you saw, felt, or remembered, consistently stop. You are being manipulated too. Inverted guilt. You feel guilty for things that aren't your responsibility. You apologize constantly. You feel like you're always the one who needs to do better. Guilt is a favorite tool of manipulators. It turns your empathy into a leash. 3. Conditional affection. Love, praise, attention, or inclusion is used as a reward, and withdrawal of these is the punishment. If you don't do what I want, I'll withhold love, or make you feel like you're the problem. This is emotional blackmail. 4. Cycle of idealization and devaluation. One day you're the best thing that ever happened to them. The next, you're worthless. This roller coaster is used to destabilize your emotional equilibrium and increase dependence. 5. Loss of self. You find yourself making decisions based on fear, approval seeking, or keeping the peace. You'll no longer trust your own judgment or intuition. If you're shrinking to fit someone else's comfort, you're being conditioned. Disarming the tactics. Once you've identified the presence of dark psychological manipulation, the next step is disarming. This doesn't always mean confrontation. In many cases, it means regaining your clarity and boundaries quietly and firmly. 1. Name the behavior. The moment you name a tactic, whether it's gaslighting, guilt-tripping, or triangulation, it loses power. It shifts from being something that happens to you to something you observe and understand. Example: this feels like I'm being guilted into something rather than asked honestly. Naming the tactic introduces psychological distance, which reduces emotional control. 2. Validate your inner voice. Years of manipulation train you to distrust your own thoughts and feelings. Start rebuilding that trust by listening to your body. Tightness in the chest, knots in the stomach, headaches after interactions. These are signs, affirmations like, if it feels wrong, I don't need proof, it's enough that I feel it. My boundaries are valid, even if others don't like them. Help you restore your sovereignty. 3. Stop explaining yourself. Manipulators thrive on explanations. Why? Because they use them against you. The more you explain, the more they twist your words. Instead, use phrases like, I've made my decision. That's not up for discussion. I don't need to justify my boundary. Simplicity is strength. 4. Limit emotional availability. If you can't cut ties yet, begin by reducing emotional exposure. Be polite, but not vulnerable. Be present, but not available for emotional harvesting. Not everyone deserves access to your inner world. Think of it as emotional encryption. They may be speaking to you, but they're not penetrating your inner code. 5. Strengthen your identity. Manipulation weakens your sense of self. Reclaim it by re-engaging in things that remind you who you are. Hobbies, friends, nature, learning. The more defined your identity, the harder it is for someone to rewrite your story. Escaping the manipulation matrix. Disarming dark psychology is not just about defense. It's about escape and rebuilding. Step 1. Create distance. Physical or psychological distance is essential, whether that means going no contact or just mentally detaching. Distance gives you perspective. Step 2. Detox your mind. Journal. Talk to a therapist. Speak to trusted people outside the manipulator's influence. Say the things you were afraid to say out loud. Truth is the antidote to distortion. Step 3. Relearn autonomist. Start making small decisions independently. Trust your no again. Practice saying I don't agree even in safe contexts. Relearn sovereignty. One act at a time. From prisoner to guardian. Once you break free, you don't just escape the manipulator, you become immune to the tactic. What once ensnared you now becomes visible, even in others. You become a guardian, not just of yourself, but of others around you. You start spotting manipulation in corporate policies designed to guilt compliance, political rhetoric that uses fear, and loyalty, friendships that run on obligation, not authenticity, because now you see the pattern. Awareness is the master key. The chains of dark psychology are invisible till you learn to see them. Then they shatter. This isn't just about breaking free from a person. It's about freeing your mind from toxic loops, about rewriting the inner narrative, about never again being the puppet of someone else's emotional games. Remember, you are not too sensitive. You are not crazy. You are not broken. You are just being manipulated. And now, you're not. You're clear. You're strong. You're unbreakable. Welcome back to your mind. Welcome back to your power. The chains are broken. Now walk free. Chapter 15. Mental Armor. Building Resistance and Reclaiming Power. You survived. You saw the manipulation for what it was. You recognized the gaslighting, the mimicry, the coercion. You broke the cycle. But surviving is not the final destination. Thriving is taught to thrive. You need more than distance from darkness. You need mental armor. Not walls to isolate you, but shields to protect you. Not just defense mechanisms, but psychological tools that allow you to engage with the world without being controlled by it. This chapter is your blueprint for psychological resilience, for rewiring the mind after manipulation, for reinforcing your boundaries, defending your identity, and reclaiming the power that was slowly taken from you. You are not a victim anymore. You are the architect of your freedom, and this is how. You build your fortress from the inside out. The shift from survival to sovereignty in the immediate aftermath of escaping manipulation. You may feel disoriented, exhausted, or raw. You've been operating in fight, flight, or freeze mode, constantly anticipating emotional threats. But now, the focus shifts from defense to design. Survival asks, how do I escape? Sovereignty asks, how do I reclaim what's mine? Mental armor is the psychological upgrade that transforms trauma into wisdom and pain into strength. It doesn't mean you stop feeling it, means you stop being controlled by what you feel. The 5 pillars of mental armor. Just as a suit of armor has multiple parts, each protecting a different area of the body, your mental armor must protect the different facets of your mind. Here are the 5 foundational components. 1. Cognitive discernment. Sharpening the sword of truth. Must learn to see manipulation not through emotion, but through analysis. This doesn't make you cold, it makes you clear. Red flag reflex. Train yourself to spot manipulative language, love bombing, or guilt traps immediately. Mental rewind. After any emotionally intense interaction, replay it like a detective, not a victim. What was said? What was implied? What was the tactic? Think of it like decoding a spell. Once you understand the incantation, it loses its magic. Discernment is the mental sword that cuts through illusion. 2. Emotional regulation. Mastering the inner storm. Manipulators thrive on emotional chaos. That's their battlefield. To defend yourself, you need calm command over your emotional system. Name it, to tame it. Label your emotions when they arise. This is anxiety. This is shame. Naming reduces their grip. Pause before reacting. Take 3 deep breaths before responding to anything triggering. This disrupts impulsive emotional reactions. Emotional reparenting. Offer your inner child what they were denied: comfort, validation, and protection. Remember, emotional regulation is not repression. It is the art of conscious feeling. 3. Boundary. Mastery. Defining the edges of self. If manipulation is a breach, boundaries are the walls, not to shut others out, but to keep your core intact. 3-tier boundary system. Non-negotiables. Absolute limits. For example, no verbal abuse. No lies. Negotiables. Flexible but defined. Time, space, favors. Open space, shared empathy, growth, communication. 1 line. Rule. No boundary needs an essay. If you can't state it in 1 sentence, it's too complicated to enforce. That doesn't work for me is a full sentence. I'm not available for that is a shield. Boundaries aren't confrontational, clarifying. They protect your peace. 4. Identity reclamation. Rebuilding the self after enduring manipulation. Your sense of self may feel blurry. You've been molded, criticized, mirrored, or erased. Now it's time to redraw the map of who you are on your own terms. Identity inventory. List the qualities you know are truly yours. I'm compassionate. I value truth. I like solitude. Erase the echoes. Write down statements that were implanted by others. For example, you're too sensitive. You're never enough. And challenge them. Ask, do I believe this, or was I trained to? Reclaim voice. Start expressing preferences out loud. Music, food, decisions. Use I think, I want, and I believe, without apology. Reclaiming identity is an act of quiet revolution. You are not who they told you to be. You are who you choose to become. 5. Spiritual grounding. Anchoring in something deeper. Whether spiritual, philosophical, or psychological, you need something deeper than fear to stand on. Manipulation thrives in disconnection. Grounding ends the chaos. Daily anchors. Practices like prayer, meditation, journaling, or even walking in nature become rituals of reconnection. Choose meaning. Choose what suffering meant to you. Was it a warning, a teacher, a portal to deeper self-respect? Higher? Loyalty. Shift your loyalty from people-pleasing to soul alignment. Let decisions flow from your values, not others' opinions. What grounds you, guards you, when you know who you are and what you serve. No manipulator can override your inner compass. How to stay vigilant without becoming paranoid. Building mental armor doesn't mean living in suspicion. It means living with discernment. Trust slowly, but not cynically. Let people earn your trust. Not all connection is manipulation, but all trust should be observed over time. Stay curious, not fearful. Ask questions, not because you're paranoid, but because you value clarity. Use soft shields. You can be warm without being open to exploitation. Boundaries can coexist with kindness. You don't have to choose between being strong and being loving. The strongest love is self-honoring. Recovery is rebirth. Healing from dark psychology isn't just recovery, it's rebirth. The person you're becoming is wiser, stronger, and more aware than the one who was wounded. And your pain wasn't pointless. It sharpened your vision. It built your armor. It taught you the architecture of manipulation, so you can never be caged again. You're not just protected now. You're powerful. From wounded to weaponized wisdom. Mental armor isn't fear. It's freedom. It doesn't mean you never get hurt again. It means that hurt no longer defines you. It means the next time someone tries to play games with your mind, you'll smile not with innocence, but with insight, because now you recognize the tactics. You trust your instincts. You speak your truth. You guard your peace. You own your power. You are not broken. You are battle-tested. You are not fragile. You are forged. And the next time darkness knocks, you won't answer with fear. You'll answer with armor, unshakable, unbreakable, you. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with others who might find it helpful. Your support means everything, and helps this channel grow and reach more people. And if you'd like to go even further in supporting the channel, consider joining as a member to get exclusive content and behind-the-scenes insights. Stay curious, stay powerful, and I'll see you in the next one.